magazine. We looked at the issues, and sir, I ask you, is it time for Senate Democrats to play hardball?
Absolutely. Court packing and court expansion or court reform, however you want to call it, is the appropriate solution in this situation. It is the proportional response. As you laid out so brilliantly in your opening, Mitch McConnell has already changed the number of justices on the Supreme Court. He changed it from 9 to 8. If Mitch McConnell can do it, then the Democrats can do it. If the Republicans want to say that the number of justices on the Supreme Court is a function of raw political power, then when the Democrats have raw political power, they are allowed to use it and use it effectively. And in this case, that means expanding the number of justices on the Supreme Court. I have a lot of arguments, Ari, that we can get into about the good government reasons for having more justices on the Supreme Court. I think that is a legitimately good thing for our polity. But I also have the vengeance argument here. I do not think that this country can long survive a world where only Republicans get to appoint justices to the Supreme Court. And that is what Mitch McConnell would have us living.
And you just put your finger on it. If there's a Democratic president, no justice. If there's a Republican president, they get their justices. So, as you just put it, if that's the position, and they've shown it in public, and Lindsey Graham and others are almost gleeful about admitting the hypocrisy because it just reinforces the trolling power play, which has become the proverbial lingua franca of the Republican Party under Donald Trump. And that's the position. Now, I think the best argument against this, again, I try to present this, people make up their own mind. The best argument against this is it's not ideal. And the problem with that argument, which I think is fair, and I mentioned constitutional hardball, nothing's ideal right now. 2020 is not ideal. This balance of power is not ideal. Seats being already taken hostage isn't ideal. Why do you think it is hard for some of the elected Democrats to see that if Mitch McConnell's hostage taking is rewarded, if there's no consequence, then you're actually incentivizing them doing it to you again?
Well, I think part of the problem the Democrats have faced here is that they're just not thinking big enough, right? One of the arguments that you hear against court expansion is, where does it end? If they put 2, then we'll put 3, and they'll put 5. Who cares? Bring it. I say, add 10 justices to the Supreme Court right now. That makes it a 19-member body. If the Republicans want to come out and add 10 justices after that, that's 29 justices. That's about the size of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Can you give me a really good argument for why the Supreme Court should be so significantly smaller than our circuit courts? I can't. So then the Democrats,
it's 1 o'clock.
10 more and 10 more, and we get to 100 justices. I don't care. I can live in that world. You know why? Because the more justices on the Supreme Court there are, the less important any one random death is to our polity.
So let me jump in with two. Let me jump in with two things. One, Elie Mystal with big Ninth Circuit facts. I haven't heard anyone point out that there are other important places in the federal judiciary that are large. And by the way, as lawyers know, but people may not care to learn about it because it's not the most important day-to-day thing in your life, the vast majority of federal cases are adjudicated and resolved in those, as you're pointing out, larger courts and below, not at the Supreme Court. But two, because you mentioned the other arguments, and we like everyone to hear everything, Chuck Rosenberg, who is a very thoughtful lawyer, as you know, with a lot of experience, he argues against what you're saying. Take a listen.
Here's the problem, in my view. Let's say the Democrats take both chambers of Congress and the presidency and expand the number to 11. And then 4 years later, the Republicans do the exact same thing and up the number to 13 or 15. I mean, there's no limiting principle on this. And so what might be an appealing short-term solution, I think could have disastrous long-term consequences.
So to build on the colloquy, because you were speaking this, is your argument to Mr. Rosenberg and thus Biden and Schumer that long-term doomsday scenario isn't really a doomsday at all?
Exactly. Why do we need a limiting principle on this at all? One of the things that is benefit, and you already brought up the circuit courts. One of the things that we benefit from the circuit court system is that the judges who hear most of the cases are drawn by random lot in 3-judge panels. So if we had a 50-person Supreme Court, most cases would be decided by a random drawing of 3. That would significantly and I think positively change the kinds of cases that came to the Supreme Court, because people wouldn't be so sure just which judges they would get. So there are lots of arguments for why an expanded court, by the way, could hear more cases. That's a thing that's happened. Not to get too much into the weeds, but the Supreme Court has heard fewer and fewer cases over the years than it used to. An expanded Supreme Court would hear more cases. That's more opportunity for intellectual, gender, and racial diversity. Right now, the Supreme Court is currently staffed by 9 people who went to 2 law schools. What's up with that? You could fix that if you had more. So there are lots of decent, good, bipartisan reasons.
Not to get too into the weeds either, but what you're suggesting is a similar model that would have the court break out into potentially smaller groups, and if something super important, go full en banc when required.
Exactly. Do you know how difficult it would be to have a string of decisions? Let's say the court is 29 people. Do you know how difficult it would be to have a string of high-profile decisions that came down 15-14? It would almost never happen because, Ari, as you know, the law is frankly just too complicated for that, right? These high-level jurors have too many things going on to break down along hardcore party lines as you add more and more and more people to the mix. So again, from a perspective of making the court less political, having more justices, having their deaths not matter as much. All of those are good things before you now re-enter the hypocrisy of McConnell and Graham and the Republicans having the current court determined based only on their whims.
Really interesting, which is why we wanted to turn to you. I suspect this will stay in the debate, and many people think that's warranted. Also, I haven't seen you since we've gone into this pandemic remote world. We relied on you many times in the Mueller probe, but I will say